Welcome to this edition of Transformation Thursday. As always, we are excited and grateful that you are joining us for this discussion. Again, as always, Dr. Chappelle is right alongside me. And so we look forward to our conversation on today, on this July the 4th. Christopher, on this day, people all across the country are celebrating July 4th in recognition of this country's independence or freedom from England. And over the last few years or so, and specifically, I know here in the state of Florida, we hear over and over the idea of freedom. And I'll often question, what does that really mean to people? What does it really mean to be free? Is your idea around freedom centered around your desire to do what you want to do? What is the real meaning of freedom and how people view freedom? Last year, as always, I usually pick out a word that I hold on to, and it becomes my target, if you will, that I push towards throughout the year. And last year, my word was freedom. Freedom. And the way I saw it was to think about those things that I found myself bound to. And some of those things were certain thinking that was not productive, certain habits that were not productive, things that held me bound and prevented me from moving into the destiny and promise that God had for me. And those things I wanted to break free from. Procrastination, or again, those negative thoughts and thinking, all the things that hold you bound and keep you from moving into it. And so to today, on this July the 4th and Transformation Thursday, I want to talk about freedom. And I want to ask you, Dr. Chappelle, when you hear the word freedom, what does that say to you?
It says a lot, because there's so many different directions, as you mentioned, that you can take the thought path with that particular word. You can talk about economic freedom and just having discretionary time to do the things that you choose to do, desire to do, and want to do. You can talk about spiritual freedom in the sense that we have the opportunity to worship freely in this country, whatever deity that we see fit. I particularly choose Jesus. And then you have other types of freedom that people would normally associate with, whether that's any particular preference or orientation towards any particular thing. But when I think about freedom and ultimately being free for me, is really rooted in my best ability to worship freely, to not be restricted in the way that I worship, but moreover, not be weighted and pulled down by anything that has control over me other than the God that I serve. So when I'm marching towards freedom, it's really about that expression and trying to be all that God created me to be, to me, that's the most liberating form of freedom.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I love that. You know, I was thinking about as you were discussing. I was thinking about Paul, specifically his language in Romans chapter 7, towards the end of that particular chapter, where Paul says, the good that I want to do, I find myself not doing. And the stuff that I don't want to do, I find myself doing. And then he goes on to say, oh, wretched man that I am. And he says, who can deliver me from this? Who can deliver me from the bondage that I find myself in? And then he says, thanks be to God through Jesus Christ. And then the next piece in chapter 8 is what's so powerful for me, because then Paul says, therefore, there is now no condemnation to those who are in Christ Jesus. And I love that text. I love that text because Paul literally is saying, I was bound in sin, in shame, in guilt, and all those things weighed me down. And I could not, as you pointed out, worship the way I would like. I could not have the relationship with him that I would like. I was stuck, bound. And then he says, now there is no condemnation to those who are in Christ Jesus. So he says, because I'm in Christ Jesus, I'm now free. So all that stuff that would weigh me down, the shame and guilt that's associated with certain things, my hiccups and hang-ups, there's nothing that can condemn me now. People can't condemn me. Even I can't condemn me. That's so powerful. He says, I don't condemn you, and therefore no one else, not even yourself, can hold you in bondage. And so it's always the enemy that is working to keep us bound, to keep us bound. We're free, but his job is to keep us bound in our thoughts, that affects our actions, that affects our behavior, and ultimately limit us from walking in our destiny and the promise that he has for us.
So, you know, the greatest trick that the enemy pulls is to try to convince you that you're not free, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I love the fact that the Bible tells me that whom the Son set free, he's free indeed.
Yeah.
And when we walk and exercise in that freedom, then we don't have to worry about the whispers and the lies of the enemy. The enemy would tell you that there's not enough. The enemy would tell you that it would never change. It'll tell you that you're not good enough. So you stay bound to negative thoughts and poor emotions. But when we truly embrace who he says we are and start to move towards what we are purposed to be, then we start to break those shackles and those chains one by one, because the liberation and the freedom that we have is really rooted in the fact it says that not only can you walk in abundance, but I'm more than enough. You're good enough. because I made you good enough. And if we just simply believe, then the doors open, the chains fall.
Yeah.
When we walk in the strength, and like one of the things, let me point this out. One of the things that the enemy often would tell people is that there's too many rules and too much confinement.
Yeah.
But really, there's the freedom in structure that gives you the creativity, that gives you the safety, and everything else that you would like for your life.
Yeah.
But the enemy is always playing these dirty games, and we have to make sure that we don't fall for them.
Man, that's good. That's good. I think that's critical for each of us, because all of us are wrestling. We're wrestling with the enemy and what he's saying, what he's whispering, and we're always going back and forth and not fully grabbing hold to the freedom that we have been afforded, the freedom to live not just the life that God has purposed, but he says, I came to give you not just life, but an abundant life, a life that's overflowing, a life that spills over into someone else's life so that they can be better as well. That's the freedom that he has given us. And every day we have to walk in that freedom. We have to walk in that freedom. We have to make declarations that we will walk in that freedom, that I am strong, and regardless of what is being said, I am enough.
Yes. More than true. One of the things, I have a picture in one of my offices on the wall, and it's a picture of Mandela, but it's a quote there.
Mm-hmm.
He says this, freedom isn't free, but you have to be willing to pay the price and bear the cost. Mm-hmm. And fortunately for us, for our freedom, we had someone to pay the price.
Yeah.
And he bore the cost so that we can walk in that freedom. And if we fail to walk in that freedom, it's our fault, because everything that we need, everything that we can possibly desire is available. He said this. He says, hey, if you ask me, he said, I'll give it to you.
Mm-hmm.
If you keep my word. It's conditional.
Right. Uh-huh.
Freedom comes with conditions. Freedom comes with a cost to be paid. So we walk in it, embrace it, and enjoy it.
I love it. I love it. I think that is spoken so well. And it's a great conclusion on this Transformation Thursday, July the 4th, where many across the country are celebrating independence or freedom from man's bondage. Some are still under bondage. But there's another type of freedom that's even more important. And that's a spiritual freedom. This is freedom to walk in your purpose, to walk in the promises that God has for you, to fulfill the destiny that's already been laid out for you. And each of us should affirm on this Transformation Thursday that I'm strong, that I'm more than enough, that I'm a conqueror, and more importantly, I am free. I am freed. That's our thought on this Transformation Thursday. See you next week.